Controversy involving the LGBT community in sports in the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia. That story and more next on a special edition of Carpe Diem. Hello, welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Mark Rosenwig, Associate Professor in the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. While athletes prepare for the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia, members of the LGBT community in sports are concerned about an anti-gay ordinance in that country and its possible impact on the Games. We discussed that controversy and others facing the LGBT community in sports during a panel discussion at the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center on the MSU campus. I was joined by guests who have studied those challenges. The panel included Hudson Taylor, founder of Athlete Ally, a group that fosters equality in sports and society, Jane McManus, reporter for ESPNNewYork.com, and Jared Max, former anchor for both ESPN New York and WCBS Radio. Max told his listeners a couple of years ago that he is gay. Taylor hopes the Russian Olympics will highlight awareness of the drive for equality.
I think Sochi is such a wonderful opportunity. The world's going to be watching, and we need to do it right if we're going to change not only, I think, the international conversation around LGBT issues, but more importantly, the situation for the LGBT community in Russia. Because the games are going to come and go, and there's still going to be a group of people that are affected by these attitudes and these laws. So, for us, there's a couple things that we've really considered. One is Rule 50 within the Olympic Charter says that athletes are prohibited from making any kind of political statement. So, that's a very kind of liberal term. What is political? And couple that with this anti-propaganda law, and now we have a really interesting climate where, almost showing same-sex attraction could be seen as a political statement because of Russia's anti-LGBT laws. So we have this climate where the IOC almost assumes the position of Russian law enforcer, right?
But it seems like they're just stepping back and be like,
well, more than that, they came out and said that
do we have money to control what?
They have no jurisdiction at the end of the day. Like, if Russia says that we're going to arrest and fine and deport people, they can do it. So what Athlete Ally is trying to do is we're going to be launching a campaign on Monday, I think. Wednesday now, okay, things are accelerating, called Principle 6. So Principle 6 of the Olympic Charter says that discrimination of any kind is incompatible with belonging to the Olympic movement. Now, that language does not include sexual orientation explicitly. So the Principle 6 campaign is really trying to do two things. One, lobby IOC to get sexual orientation included explicitly in their non-discrimination policy. But two, give people an opportunity and a vehicle through which they can express their disgust or how outraged they are about these Russian laws, but in a way that, one, hopefully it won't expose athletes to potential expulsion from the games, because I don't know, is one of the founding principles of the Olympic movement, is that political if you support it? Maybe, maybe not, but I can tell you it's certainly not in violation of Russian law. So we can talk about Principle 6, we can call into question, or we can really raise awareness about how hypocritical this whole situation is in a way that I think will have the maximum impact. So that's really what we're thinking about doing, is trying to bring people together and really talking about this. There's also talks about doing a hand-holding campaign at Sochi, something that nobody can take that away from you. I can just go to the person next to me and we can hold hands anywhere at any time, and that's a statement. So I think, again, we have to see where people are comfortable with the risk, because there is risk. So we want to try to provide as many opportunities as possible to speak out, also being aware of what people are potentially exposing themselves to.
And this is a big business situation too, because NBC has a record $800 million in ad sales already on the table, and they're saying that advertisers, while expressing concern, are not pulling out. What about from a reporting standpoint? How should this be reported now and up until and through the event? What's your view?
Right. Well, I think that the Olympics are chosen. They put the Olympics in different parts of the world to bring attention to that place in the world, to bring the world in. It's an opportunity for tourism, and it is also an opportunity for discussions like this. Now, the IOC has come out last month and said that they don't see any contradiction between the Russian law and the charter, the Olympic charter. So they're taking that position. But that doesn't mean that everybody else has to take that position. And I think that's an opportunity. I mean, how many discussions have come from the laws in Russia and the fact that the Olympics are going to be held there? It's been a real opportunity, I think, for people to discuss it. And I think back to 1936 when Berlin hosted the Olympics and Hitler was in power, and when Jesse Owens won those 4 medals in track and field, and how important that was and what a message that was, and how the rest of the world, what the rest of the world sees now when they think about that. And in some ways, this is an opportunity, I think, for that issue to become something that people talk about. And, when we talk about, there are going to be gay athletes there. And are those athletes going to be inherently discriminated against because of these policies? I think Putin is kind of backing away from it a little bit, and he's talking about now, well, it's only if you spread propaganda to minors, and I mean, as if they're not going to find out about homosexuality if you don't talk to them about it. But this is an opportunity to talk about things, and so I think it's important for the media to cover this issue and to really get all sides of it and make sure that it isn't. I mean, the real problem would be if this law were in place, people went to the Olympics, no one talked about it.
Right.
Yeah, I think the silence here, but that silence, I don't think is going to happen because every day I think I'm getting another email from my brother he's on Twitter all the time and is showing me another comment that was made by somebody who has a pretty large voice opposing this.
Bodie Miller made one the other day.
Yeah,
too.
Bodie Miller
Yeah.
was the
And
latest.
this was written up. I think it's absolutely embarrassing that there are countries and people who are that intolerant and that ignorant. But it's not the first time we've been dealing with human rights issues, probably since there were human beings.
Jane mentioned 1936. What's amazing is that Jesse Owens, the ultimate, kick in the face to Hitler and that kind of, the disgusting mentality that there were also, you also had Marty Glickman, who's a longtime Jets announcer, and Sam Stoller, 2 members of the U.S. track team who were Jewish, who were sent home, who were supposed to be competing and did not compete. And Jesse Owens essentially, not that this is why he would say, one was to say, well, yeah, take that to Hitler, but it was also, the Jewish runners couldn't compete, but they had an African-American runner, and that was even more so at Hitler. So I was talking with, I got to moderate an event with Logo TV, gay network, and newnow.next.com recently it was called Russia versus the Gays, and it was all about the Olympics. And we spoke to Greg Louganis, and he was on with us in video chat. And I had asked Greg about Rule 50, and Rule 50 essentially being that you will not be, you're not going to get political and make any political statements. And Jacques Rogue, who's the president, outgoing, but the current president of the International Olympic Committee, had said that we will be reminding our athletes of Rule 50. And I asked Greg Louganis, I said, if you heard that from the head of the IOC, what would that say to you? Like, oh, we'll be reminding them again. And the comments that we got throughout that whole panel was mostly, people think that there's going to be some expressions of, which Olympics was it where there was the Black Power statement?
That was Mexico City, right?
Mexico City.
Juan Carlo?
Yeah.
Tommy Smith.
Smith, yeah.
That there are people that along those lines that there's going to be something, and you know what?
Yeah.
Darn well there better be something, because I think, and I don't mean it in the sense to cause a violent uprising, but people are watching. It's time for the biggest names to step forward who can and say enough.
I think the challenge is that you look at the Olympic athlete population, and you only have handful within that population who are openly LGBT. So I think at a certain point, we're all obviously going to be watching those LGBT athletes, but we have to kind of hedge our bets a little bit and hope that lots of people are speaking out. Lots of people are taking issue with these laws and this mentality, because I think it affects everybody. And you know, I think it's going. I don't know what IOC. I mean, do you think IOC is going to try to revoke a medal of somebody who makes a statement?
Couldn't IOC maybe essentially strong arm Putin and Russia into saying, well, you know what, there's a lot of money involved here and we can control a lot of this. Either you get in line with the way of the Western world, and I'm a big believer that you don't go into somebody's country and say, this is how you do things. However, if you're getting all this money to host this party, this international thing where everyone's going to gather at the opening and closing ceremonies and hold hands, sorry, you got to adhere to things. You just don't get to take all that money and have nothing, no education for it. President Obama had recently said that, and it reminded me of the Jesse Owens, what he did. Obama said, I want to see our LGBT athletes do well, but the best thing that we could do, win some medals. And like I was saying to Greg Louganis, isn't that the ultimate in sports? Don't trash talk to me. Look at the scoreboard. And that's, I mean, as a sportsman, I mean, we all know it. Look at the scoreboard. How does that look?
I will bet that there are discussions taking place between the Russian government and the IOC about how this law is going to be implemented, whether or not people are going to be arrested. What I think is interesting is that the law fines Russian citizens who violate it, but it arrests foreigners who violate it. 15 days in jail is the penalty for it.
Which makes you wonder, what can you get for 15 days? If it's a little peck on the cheek, if it's like 15 days, it's like a baseball manager gets kicked out of a game. I'm already out.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 days for what? If I put my hand on your shoulder?
It actually depends on who you represent. So if you come as an individual, if you come representing an organization, or if you come as a government official, the penalties are different. The fines are different. So I think as a private citizen, you're right. It's up to 15 days and I think a $3,000 fine. But I mean, who knows? You look at a band like Pussy Riot, like they're serving like 2 years intensive labor in like Siberia.
In some ways, they seem to be more harsh on their own citizens than
that is why I wonder
others.
if this ultimately the backlash that this law is getting, is it a catalyst for change within Russia itself? Ultimately, I mean, is that what's happening? Is it the Russian citizens look and say, "Wow, everybody thinks that this is really a crazy law. Now I'm going to have to think about this law." And I mean, and I don't know exactly how the political process works there, but you would think that this has an opportunity to make an impact, not just in the countries who are watching this take place, but also within the country itself.
Well, I think the answer is it's Putin. That's the political process. And if there are economic pressures or some other international factors at work, then maybe something will happen. If not, it won't.
I think we also have to realize that this legislation was passed unanimously, and something like 80% of Russian population supports it. So they're seeing this in a very different way than we are seeing it. I think, and this could be totally wrong, but my assumption is that they see this legislation as a way to protect children. They see this as being about, we want to save and protect children. So that's the framework that we're operating from. So how we pivot that conversation, how we expand the conversation, I think is a challenge, but that's where we need to be working from if we're going to make a difference in Russia.
Also, a future Olympics, I'm sure, where this is probably going to, at least, if nothing else, this is going to have an effect on a place maybe where it hasn't before, is that where future host cities, when they're up for something, that there's that, look, this law in Russia just went into effect a few months ago, long after Sochi was awarded the Olympic Games. So there has to be something almost, some kind of clause which is in there says, sorry, whatever barbaric laws that others might see this as that get passed beforehand, we're going back to this. I mean,
but, Qatar has been awarded the 2022 World Cup.
Right.
So I think the idea is they want to, these international organizations, they don't want it to be just, Western Europe, the U.S. get awarded these games.
Are they trying to use sports to spread John Lennon peace love?
Exactly.
I think so.
Yeah, exactly. And who's to say that it's not going to work?
No,
I mean,
it could.
We haven't seen it, but I mean, I think that's the idea, is that people go to Qatar and anti-drinking laws are on the books. I mean, I can't think of a lot of Man U fans who are going to be really happy to go to a match, where they can't get a beer,
Bodie
or
Miller's
any other
glad it's
fan.
the Summer Games.
Right. But so you do have these things. So sports has a way of bringing focus and attention onto these different laws, whether they're laws against women in different countries or they're laws, about drinking or about homosexuality or anything else. The Olympics can focus attention on things that we consider to be injustice, whether it's girls not being educated to the level that boys are or whatever that is.
I want to see Bob Costas do a major, Bob Costas is great at, he'll take those opportunities to, and he's been criticized for him sometimes, to go and speak his mind. Mm-hmm. Bob Costas is probably the most recognizable face of NBC. And I don't even know, NBC, no matter what, when they're on the air, you always look, you see the Olympic rings. NBC paid a lot of money for the Olympics. Bob Costas is the face. And while there are other faces, he's the face. I would love to see Bob Costas step out and, I don't know, tell some personal story. Tell something where you have the audience of America, a bunch of people who might see you as, hey, he's one of us, and then kind of realize, oh, well, maybe I need to change my way and go to that side. Because
he might be the one to do it, because he certainly did so with gun control on Sunday Night Football, which
again,
caused a
his
stir.
bosses certainly will be, there will
The
be.
Walter Cronkite moment of the Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah, Walter Cronkite was huge, very strong for the LGBT community, something people didn't really know about.
But getting back to this country, Hudson, you made a reference earlier about there are several different countries here that we're dealing with. Most of us have spent most of our lives in the Northeast, and we're not saying our region is better or worse than any others, but there are different lifestyles. I mean, I've lived in New Orleans and Miami and Detroit and different places, and I think one of the things that happens with some of these issues is the environment that people grow up with, and also the fact that religion has been cited as a factor in this, that many teams have chapel services every day, and that people are reluctant to do or say certain things about alternative lifestyles or whatever we want to call it because of these religious observances. I mean, is that a fair statement, do you think?
So, I think that there are two things that vary people's, they vary geographically, they alter people's perceptions around LGBT issues. One is certainly faith. I was raised in a evangelical Christian family. My parents are pretty socially conservative, and while they were very comfortable with me being a all-American wrestler, they're still wrapping their minds around like gay rights activists. Like, well, I'm not so sure about that. But so I think faith is certainly one piece of this puzzle. But then I think the other that varies from community to community and culture to culture is how we teach masculinity and femininity to our kids. So, as somebody who lives in the South, what does it mean to be a man in the South? Or what does it mean to be a man in the African American community? I think a lot of the issues around LGBT discussions stem from improper assumptions of what a man or a woman is supposed to look and act like. And I think in the locker room, then that is the way that we see that manifest is through homophobic and sexist language. And oftentimes, calling somebody a sexist slur is interchangeable for a homophobic slur. And it's all used as a reason or a way to say, look, you're being less than what I think you should be as a man or as a woman, right? So I think that's a big piece of this puzzle is like, for me, a lot of the work I do is like trying to redefine what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? But then on the faith side of things, I think, it's very difficult. You can't change somebody's faith. Faith is faith. So I feel like, there's a place and a time for that conversation, but in a lot of work that I do, it's kind of like, all right, we're going to agree to disagree on these 3 points because of your faith. However, I think what we can all agree on is that we can all be a little bit kinder. We can all treat each other just a little bit better. And there's 4 or 5 words that you never need to use to diminish someone else. And if we go back to that and we just focus on that, well, guess what? I think we're going to see some great progress, even though we still disagree on some very fundamental issues.
I think can I just pick up on your point about masculinity and femininity? We haven't talked a lot about women's sports today, but there are a lot of openly gay women who play professional sports, and I don't think their teammates say anything about it or really care that much. Occasionally it bubbles up in an issue here or there, but for the great majority of women playing sports, playing with a gay teammate is a known and acceptable event. And I think that has to do with the masculinity and femininity. And I talked to John Amici about this because, I'd asked him kind of, why didn't you come out while you were still playing? And he said there is no, we make a lot of assumptions based on these ideas of what a man should be and a woman should be. And there is no stereotype that would make you think that a less masculine man would be good at sports. But a more masculine woman, of course. So he's like, in order for my job, it didn't help me to align myself, with with this less masculine characteristic, because then it would take away in other people's mind potentially from what people thought I could do. So I thought that was interesting, and it also, because it doesn't hurt women.
And I think that's one of the big issues is for all the progress that we've seen, all the, at the college level, there are athletes coming out on every college campus, but homophobia is still present in women's sports. While there are out female athletes, Brittany Griner was a perfect example. She was told that she probably should come out while she was at school.
She chose a very
Yes,
conservative school.
totally.
I don't know that she would necessarily have had that experience if she'd chosen a lot of other programs.
I think that's probably true as an athlete, but where I think it is true across the board is with the coaches. The coaches' closet is extremely deep for female coaches, for male coaches. I mean, you can count the number of out coaches on.
Well, the New York
2
Times said
hands.
it's 3 in Division I that are officially declared, and that's got to be a concern, because these are the people who are dealing with these athletes who may be dealing with their own personal issues and their relationships with people. I mean, wouldn't you think?
A lot of friends and family have asked me over the years, hey, Jared, how come, is this really a big deal anymore? Do people really care anymore? Or it's 2013. And I want to say, yeah, for us, fine. But there's a reason why Major League Baseball, National Football League, NBA, NHL, we don't have one active out athlete. Not one. It's 2013. Why? Why? I don't have the answers. I can come up with some theories, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking that it's all, we're all there yet, because we're not. And there needs to be essentially some kind of revolution within it, that, some kind of uprising where finally, hey, there's that moment where people get it. I mean, it's funny, like masculinity, femininity. I knew that when I came out, I was not afraid at all that people were going to start looking at me in, say, a different way of, because I've always thought, well, I get to almost cross party lines. I don't look gay, I don't sound gay, whatever that means. But I know that. And I know that even like today when I decided, well, what am I going to wear? I was grabbing a shirt, and I thought, well, a couple of years ago, before I was out publicly, I wouldn't have grabbed a shirt like this maybe, because I thought, oh, man, purple, light color, people might think, ooh, what's that? And even as I grab it today, I thought, do I want to be more in contrast? Do I want to go more of a masculine color? And I'm at the point where it doesn't matter. This is who I am. But these are the types of thoughts that do go into that mentality. How do I present myself? And for me, it's very important to, and that's why I want to see somebody in sports who's a very masculine dude, who's a real man's man, who's going to step forward and be the biggest star of the league and say, guess what, guys? I'm gay. Deal with it. And then the rest of the league basically has to say, okay, well, we'll deal with it. We've always
You have no
idolized
choice.
you before, So.
Well, where do you all think we're going to be with these issues 5 years from now? I mean, will we get to that point, or is it hard to predict at this point?
Well, I like to think of where we've come in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it has been
a lot.
It's quite a bit of ground has been covered. I think, you're right that with coaches, it's the idea that you're going into a minor's living room and asking them to come to the school and be under your wing for 4 years. And parents, again, a generational thing. Parents may have an issue with that for whatever reason. I don't think it would bother me. I have 2 children. It wouldn't bother me at all. And there are sports where gay men and women play, or gay men play with straight men side by side, and that's roller derby. They change. I mean, I know this is not a major sport, but it's something I'm familiar with. So, and there's no problem. There's no, you might have 50-50 split in teams between gay and straight players, and it's totally accepted. And and that's a little bit of a fringe sport in the same way that it's younger people generally. You don't have those entrenched traditions, and so I think you're going to see more and more sports kind of evolve toward that direction.
I played in the New York Gay Football League, which is a flag football league. And I'm sure that people hear that, they say, oh, that's funny. And when I would tell people, it would still sound funny saying it, that they're like, there's a New York Gay Football League, what's that, flag football? And I was shocked that when I went out to go play, I wanted to go show, hey man, I can play. I played football in school. I was shocked by how rough and tough a lot of the guys were. Where I came to, my theory that I came from it all was that a lot of these guys grew up not playing football in the street every day, say I was doing or doing it, and that they're at a point now in life where like, I can do it. And it was very awkward. It was almost awkward for me because I felt, we all got to go to work on Monday. Let's ease up. And these guys want to hit 5 yards off the line. And I'm thinking, please, this is not the time. But again, I think that's where you're dealing with somebody who, again, masculinity and a femininity issue. I think that's huge. Femininity. How do you say? Femininity.
There you go.
Yeah.
Femininity.
Hudson, 5 years from now? What do you think?
I think we're gonna keep moving in the same direction. I think we're right at that like tipping point. I feel like, could an NFL player who's a big star come out tomorrow? I think it's possible. Could it also happen in 2 months or 2 years or 5 years? It could also be a long time. So I think there's just a responsibility on all of our parts to keep the conversation going, keep pushing people to speak out and be vocal, because, they're there. We know they're there. And having openly LGBT players competing does more than anything else. I mean, that changes lives.
Hudson Taylor and Athlete Ally plan to continue the push for equality throughout the sports community. Special thanks to Burr Museum Director Dave Kaplan for making this panel possible. For more information on this or any edition of Carpe Diem, contact us at carpediem@mail.montclair.edu or call 973-655-5158. I'm Mark Rosenwig. For all of us at Montclair State University, thanks for watching Carpe Diem.